Someone freezes to death on Everest. 15 hours later, he wakes up and walks back into history. Another man, trapped alone in a canyon, cuts through his own arm, then stumbles straight into a hiking family, minutes from oblivion. These are not survival stories that follow the rules. They break them, shattering the odds again and again. In 7 survivors that broke the rules of chance, luck becomes a lifeline, and every setback twists into a hidden escape route. The line between random disaster and miraculous survival? Sometimes it's razor thin. If every close call hides a pattern, how many have you missed? May 11th, 1996, near the summit of Mount Everest, Beck Weathers lay motionless at the edge of the South Col, 8,000 meters above sea level. The air was thin, the temperature had dropped to -40. By every known rule, he should have died. Hours passed. His hands and face turned the color of wax. Climbers who found him assumed the obvious. No pulse, no movement. They moved on. But Weathers wasn't finished. His vision, blurred by altitude and a pre-existing eye condition, had forced him to stay put while others tried to descend. Most of them vanished into the storm. He remained, frozen in place, a casualty in the death zone. Then, after 15 hours in the open, Weathers suddenly woke up. No shelter, no rescue, just a jolt of consciousness where none should have returned. He staggered upright, snowblind and barely able to walk, and began the impossible journey back to camp. Medical records later called it a near-miraculous revival. Survival experts still debate how his body restarted itself after so long in the cold. Some point to rare cases of hypothermia-induced metabolic slowdown. Others just shake their heads. Would you have called it luck or something stranger? On Everest, the difference between a statistic and a survivor can be as thin as a heartbeat. April 2003, Blue John Canyon, Utah. Aron Ralston lowered himself into the slot, alone, expecting a routine day of climbing. Then a boulder, weighing nearly 1,000 pounds, shifted and trapped his right arm against the canyon wall. For 5 days and nights, 127 hours, Ralston rationed his water, tried every trick he knew, and watched his options shrink. No one knew where he was. The desert was silent. He carried a cheap multi-tool, the kind most hikers leave at home, not sharp, barely up to the task, but it was just enough. When dehydration and time forced his hand, Ralston snapped the bones in his arm against the rock and used the dull blade to cut through muscle, tendon, and finally bone. There was no guarantee he'd make it out. He tied off the stump with a makeshift tourniquet, rappelled down a cliff, and staggered out of the canyon. The next coincidence, a Dutch family hiking an infrequently used trail at that exact hour crossed his path. They gave him water, called for help, and waited until the rescue helicopter arrived. Fewer than a quarter of solo hikers in similar situations survive. Ralston's ordeal would become the film 127 Hours, but the real story is in the chain of tiny accidents, a dull tool, a rare meeting, a trail chosen at random. Would you have carried that multi-tool or left it behind for weight? July 2018, California's Big Sur coast. Angela Hernandez's Jeep smashed through a guardrail and plummeted 200 feet, landing upside down on a strip of sand where cliffs meet waves. She crawled from the wreck, battered and alone. 7 days passed, no phone signal, no food, fractured ribs pressing with every breath. The ocean was all around, but salt water would kill her faster than thirst. Then, a stroke of luck. She'd crashed just 5 meters from a trickle of fresh water seeping from the rocks, the only drinkable source for miles. She cupped her hands, drank, and waited. Highway patrol records show more than 50 crashes along this stretch in 2 decades. None landed near a freshwater seep except hers. On the 7th day, 2 surfers wandered down an abandoned path, nudged there by shifting tides. They spotted her, sunburned and waving for help. Would you call that luck or geography's razor edge? Sometimes the difference is measured in footsteps. April 1994, deep in the Sahara. Mauro Prosperi, An Italian ultramarathon runner lost his way during the Marathon des Sables when a sandstorm swallowed the course. The wind pushed him not deeper into the endless dunes, but nearly 186 miles north, toward Algeria and toward life. For days, the sun seared and the water ran out. Survival in the Sahara without water rarely stretches past 3 days. Prospera made it to 9. He stumbled onto a deserted shrine, one of the few standing structures for hundreds of miles. Inside, he found a puddle left by a rare rain, just enough to sip and keep moving. When hope faded, he tried to end his ordeal, but dehydration had thickened his blood so much that his wounds clotted instantly. Even his body refused to give up. Would you have kept walking or let the desert decide? How many times have you cursed a red light, a missed bus, a wrong turn? What if those small frustrations are something else entirely? A hidden shield. A detour that nudges you out of harm's way, just far enough to keep disaster at bay. The survivors we've met didn't know they were standing at the crossroads of fate and chance. They made ordinary choices, a tool tossed in a backpack, a path wandered by accident, a moment's hesitation that kept them still while others moved on. No warning, no sign, just the silent arithmetic of probability, working in the background. How many invisible escapes have slipped by, uncounted, in your own life? Is luck just a story we tell ourselves after the fact? In 1982, Steve Callahan set out alone across the Atlantic. 6 days from landfall, a rogue wave shattered his sailboat. He scrambled into a tiny life raft, drifting in open water with almost nothing. The Atlantic is a graveyard for castaways. Most vanish without a trace. But the ocean had other plans. Instead of sweeping him into the endless blue, the currents nudged his raft into a rare corridor, a narrow band that threads toward the Caribbean. For 76 days, Callahan floated, catching rainwater and spearing fish. A miniature ecosystem grew beneath him, drawing seabirds from miles away. On day 76, Guadeloupe fishermen spotted the birds circling a patch of ocean. They looked closer and found Callahan, sunburned, barely alive. The odds of drifting into that current, of being noticed by fishermen chasing birds, are less than 0.5%. Sometimes, survival rides on a current you never see, and a flock of birds that just happens to pass by. October 2016, Montana backcountry. Todd Orr moved through the timber at first light, scanning for elk, when a grizzly sow with cubs burst from the brush. She charged, closing the distance in seconds. Bear spray, fired point blank, drifted uselessly in the wind. The bear slammed into him, claws and teeth finding flesh, but Orr curled tight, arms over his neck, refusing to move. 30 seconds, then silence. The bear retreated, blood streaming. Orr staggered up the trail, barely a mile before the same bear attacked again. This time she bit deeper, fractured his forearm, tried to roll him over. Still, he played dead, protecting his throat. The bear left. With wounds open to the bone, Orr hiked out and drove 7 miles to the hospital himself. Wildlife records show fewer than 2% survive double grizzly attacks without help. Would you have run or trusted instinct to keep you alive? 1985, Ciudad Grande, Peruvian Andes. Joe Simpson plummeted into a glacial crevasse, leg shattered, rope severed. Instead of a bottomless pit, he landed on a narrow ledge, just wide enough to stop his fall. Most crevasses are silent tombs, their walls closing off every escape. But this one hid an anomaly. Far below the surface, a thin shaft of light pierced the darkness, revealing a tunnel carved by meltwater, a rare formation found in less than 1% of surveyed crevasses on that mountain. Simpson, nearly delirious, crawled toward the glow. The tunnel snaked upward, leading him out of the ice. For 3 days, he dragged himself across glacier and moraine, arriving at base camp only hours before his partner was set to leave. Survival, balanced on a ledge, illuminated by a tunnel that almost never exists. Would you have trusted the light or waited in the dark? 7 survivors, across 4 continents in 3 decades, Each faced odds that defied medical literature and statistical probability. Beck Weathers spent 15 hours unconscious in Everest's death zone, longer than any documented case of hypothermia survival at that altitude. Aron Ralston's 127 hours in Blue John Canyon ended only because a dull multi-tool and a passing Dutch family converged at the right moment. Angela Hernandez landed just meters from a rare freshwater stream after a 200-foot fall. Mauro Prosperi's storm-driven drift brought him to water and shelter, not deeper into the Sahara. For Steve Callahan, North Atlantic currents and a flock of birds signaled rescue. Todd Orr's double mauling left him able to drive for help. Joe Simpson found a single tunnel of light in a glacier, a feature geologists confirm is rarely seen. Yet, for every documented chance, the question remains, how many narrow escapes pass unnoticed? The evidence shows survival can hinge on minutes, meters, or the smallest decision. What endures is the record, proof that ordinary routines sometimes intersect with the extraordinary in ways science still can't fully explain.